Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I like to discuss how the wheels are already starting to come off Rishi Sunak's tilt to the anti-climate brigade, and pressure against his incredibly naive actions will only build more as time goes on. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel. So this seems to be the big political discussion point right now, and may continue to be so over summer. Rishi Sunak doing something stupid would of course be noteworthy. He is the Prime Minister after all. But what he has done since the Uxbridge by-election win is so monumentally stupid that it really is a major talking point. Already we have a major investor saying that he'll pull out the UK if Sunak continues with what he calls his clickbait cycle attitude to policy. Now, billionaire investors claiming they'll quit the country if X happens or Y happens is par for the course. It's not even always serious, but it's usually in response to the prospect of, say, a Labour government forming and taking away their tax breaks. It's also the Conservatives who seize on every such statement as a reason not to upset the apple cart. But this is different, not just because it was an attack on Conservative policy, but because the billionaire investor in question, Andrew Forrest, explained the business rationale in a way that the others do not. He said he could not operate in a country that would take us over the cliff edge when it came to fossil fuel use and, climate matters essentially. And he wasn't necessarily making a moral argument, although there may have been one. He was making a business argument. What do investors want from the government of the country they invest in? Rational policy making and stability. What Forrest is saying is that Sunak is reacting to like flash in the pan bits of news and deciding his policy on it. And that's no good for business, and that's exactly right. If Labour had won Uxbridge, none of what's happened over the last week or so would have happened. He wouldn't be attacking low traffic or traffic calming schemes like this. In fact, he'd have to be accepting that actually the issue wasn't enough to help him retain. He probably wouldn't have been signing off on all those new North Sea licenses either. All because his party hit upon an election-winning strategy, even though it still resulted in a catastrophic loss of majority, and on a local issue which cannot possibly work come the general election. But so devoid of ideas is Rishi Sunak that he will seemingly willingly grab anything which his deluded mind can warp into some way of distinguishing itself from Labour. He's like a man overboard, grabbing what he thinks is a lifesaver, but it's actually an iron weight. The net zero crowd in his party were persuaded. They persuaded Sunak that anti-climate policies are vote winners. Well, they are the opposite. It's insanity. The Conservatives have already lost much of the business community. Behaviour like this, as Forrest points out, is just making it worse. It doesn't even matter what the policy is. Nobody wants to see a government pivoting on a major policy position because of a flurry of headlines. Business leaders want to see long-term planning from the government. Yes, it may have to react every now and then to something, but it wants to see that sort of long-term plan. And it'll get worse for Sunak. See, there's no way he can maintain this position, really, unless he actually wants to lose way more seats than he already would. He's going to have to pull back. But then he'll have to try and do it in a way that doesn't enrage one faction to please another. It's really insane. Rishi Sunak has been so timid as Prime Minister, specifically to avoid upsetting this delicate balance within the parliamentary party. Like, for example, he backs down on housing targets out of fear for this balance. And now he's decided to press the button for bullying a China shop maid. One of his own MPs has expressed alarm, Chris Skidmore. Now, he's standing down at the next election. He's a former Remainer, so not exactly part of the in crowd in the Tory party anyway. So, things like this aren't necessarily the sign of a bigger thing. But he was quite clear about his opposition to Sunak's new stance. And he made his statement based on the fact it was on the wrong side of history, but also the electoral reality. Voters will abandon the party over this, he said. Sunak is doing this because he wants to pursue something which he thinks can put pressure on Labour and probably make him a few quid on the side, as I'll discuss. In reality, though, it gives Labour more breathing room. Now, don't get me wrong. This, like any of the other culture wars, because that's what this is, it's a culture war, there will be voters to whom it appeals. Absolutely. Rishi Sunak knows that there's a large body of don't knows at the moment who are prepared to vote Conservative. They're just not quite willing to vote Conservative for what they're standing for at the moment. So, you know, these wavering voters, and there may well be a pocket of these wavering voters who will back the Tories because of this stance, if he maintains it. But if he loses more votes than he gains, Sunak is literally alienating the large group of voters in the centre for smaller pockets around the political spectrum, for whom he has no coherent offer. But as Forrest said, it's clickbait policy. It's seizing on whatever he thinks might attract some attention and running with it. It's not part of a coherent strategy. Sunak and whichever monkeys are advising him have read the runes spectacularly wrong here. You know, with the Uxbridge by-election, this is the mistake of his life. I will never not be amazed that Sunak managed to get he got a get out of jail card during that by-election week and then pissed it away. Seriously, if Sunak had lost all 3 of those by-elections, we'd be looking at very different headlines now. He would be facing sustained pressure. You know, there really would be a bit of a meltdown in the Tory party. It would have been a very rough summer for him, and I cannot imagine he would have been looking forward to the conference season. That single slender win, and that's all it was, gave him a bit of room. Probably still shouldn't have done, because it was still a defeat. Their majority as a share of the vote was massively cut down to like nothing. To see it as a possible general election strategy is bonkers. If the issue was such a great vote winner, why didn't it work in Selby? Why didn't it work in Somerton? In politics, you've got to be very mindful of the electoral value of policies, which means you have to weigh up how many votes it will lose as well as win and where those votes are. Sunak is chasing a small number of vote wins in seats he still won't convert because they're not going to be close and there are higher priorities for those voters. But he will lose them in the tighter contest that he should be focusing on, where the climate emergency is much higher on the agenda. And normally when I'm going to attack a policy as electorally unwise, I do tend to hesitate. A lot of people will look at it as that's clearly wrong. That's not in tune with public thinking at all. And I do keep saying, well, hang on a minute, let's be mindful of the fact we only have access to published polling. And the published polling tends to be very general. Some break it down a little bit, but it's still very general. We can't really tell where those attitudes are. We can say, okay, well, this lump of people believe this, but where are they and how important is that policy to them? We don't really see that from the polling. So what political parties can do is they commission their own polling, which is often not published at all. And they can target, they can find out, you know, what these views are, where those views are held, how strongly do you have these views? Would it change your vote, for example? They can find all that out. They can build up a very good idea of where votes will be won and lost with policy proposals. And I never see that. So how can I be certain that the Tories haven't done this and found a rich seam of votes to be won? 2 reasons, really. The first is it completely flies in the face of publicly available polling. Targeted polling adds extra nuance, more precision if you like, but it doesn't contradict the public polling. It just provides more detail. The second reason is there hasn't been time to carry that polling out. You know, certainly to carry it out, analyse it, then have policy discussions, then present the new position. Sunak reacted. This was all as a result of that Uxbridge by-election results. It wasn't something they were doing beforehand. In a matter of hours after it, he was forming new policies. Within the space of a week, his entire net zero strategy is in the bin. This is all very reactionary. No time at all to have polled for this. Yes, he still claims he's committed to net zero, by the way, but that's not going to wash. Reviews were already pointing out how his efforts were missing all the targets anyway. And now this. How can it possibly be in line with net zero? Now, it is possible that for Rishi Sunak, it's not purely a case of being deluded into thinking the issue may help him at the next election. It may be that's not his primary motivation at all. You know, he and more specifically his wife's family have benefited a great deal financially from his policies as both Chancellor and Prime Minister. Adam Bienkov of Byline Times pointed out the latest that Infosys, which is Sunak's father-in-law's business, won a huge contract from BP just a couple of months ago. You know, there are an awful lot of financial links between Sunak and the policies he pursues. The odd one might be dismissed as coincidence, sure, but there are so many of them. So Sunak It may well be primarily tempted to go along with policies like this because there's material gain for him. But he's probably kidding himself he can also make it work politically. But what is the excuse of Conservative MPs? What is their excuse? They know this isn't going to work politically. You know, Sunak is selling their chances of winning the election for a handful of silver. You know, this will end up being another stick Labour can beat the Conservatives with, even in opposition. Sunak might not care about their opposition days. He'll go to California. But the remaining Tory MPs need to think about it. They need to think about bouncing back. Labour can come straight back as a result of this. Don't let the Tories back in with their clickbait policies. You know, they decide a new policy every day depending on what's trending on Twitter, they can say. You know, government by Twitter, that is what, or X, whatever you want to call it. That is what Rishi Sunak is doing, and Labour can use that. Madness. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.